Okay, before I start the class, let me just emphasize if you haven't signed up for the Zai books, please do so because you have to actually do most of the exercises uh, in the Zai book, which is I think very useful and very helpful. Um, so in this class, I think mostly I'm gonna actually switch back and forth between the Zai book and also my presentation. Uh, so the presentation materials are basically the same as the Zai book, but somehow I can, you know, write something on the PowerPoint so I can just explain some of the topics in details. So if you have any questions, please interrupt me because if you read a book, some of the materials it's kind of easy to understand. So I don't want to spend too much time on the easy part, but in some sections, it's probably we're gonna spend more. It's possible that we're gonna spend more times, you know, in some of the sections, or we can actually even focus on some of the problems, some of the, you know, like a challenging activities or whatever. So if we experience anything, we can actually focus on, you know, some particular problem. So I assume that you already actually learned the Python, at least the one other language before we actually jump into the Java now. So which is pretty good because computer once you actually learn the computer language, you will find out, you know, a language is just a language. Basically, they're gonna have basically the same structures, okay? Except different language has a different syntax. It's almost like you are learning different, not a computer language, just like a different language, like English, French. So they have very different spelling. They have a different paragraphs, but if you look at the grammar, they are very similar. So that's you know so there's a similarity over here. So that's why the most difficult part is to learn the first language. That's the difficult part because you need to have some kind of things we call computational thinking, because the computer actually think somehow like us, but there's differences because in a computer system, the computer doesn't have any independent thinking. They basically, follow the instructions. So so the so if we want the computer to work, we need to think ahead and design some kind of instructions, and then we ask the computer to follow these instructions and execute them. So now, for the Java, um, definitely Java has a different syntax than Python, and it's honestly, Java is pretty much different from Python. Um, because if you look at the different languages, some of the languages are very similar. If you learn the Java, then it will be easier for you, much easier for you to learn C++. However, Python and Java are pretty different. You know, um, we will see now. In some case, I may point out what's the major difference between uh, Java and Python. You know, so this is actually the uh, module one. Um, so I'm gonna actually organize the module one into 1A, 1B, and 1C. And so we're gonna actually, so I don't think I'm gonna spend much time on the chapter one. So I'm gonna actually give you some kind of overview of the chapter one, because pretty much for every language, chapter one gonna be very similar. So we basically talk about the general structure of the language. For example, um, for 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 Java, um, so just like any other languages, you know. So even though you may have a whole bunch of different instructions, but basic instruction types are import and then process. This is actually the part that they're actually doing the job and doing a computing job. And so then this is the part that they gave you the output. So these are the three actually basic instruction types. You know, for every computer language, um, somehow you need to actually provide some kind of input data. So you feed the data to the program, and then the program start to do the computing job. Okay, just like when you do the addition. So you want to add two numbers, then you need to actually during the import, you need to import these two numbers. So you have to import the data X, import the data Y, and then you can process, do the calculation, and then the output, you basically display the result. So nothing special. So now recently, if you look at if you try to search the terms called computational thinking, it's kind of very popular terminology. Traditionally, when people talk about uh, when we actually try to solve any problem, they actually people talk about mathematical thinking. Okay, so mathematical thinking is basically ask us to think about when you try to solve the problem, think of the things logically. Uh, you need to provide a reasoning and some kind of things. Mathematical thinking is just not just a mathematical problem. It's not just solving the arithmetics. It's more like a way of thinking. But now in the information age, people start to talk about something called computational thinking. Okay, the computational thinking, to take it a simple way, we need to think like a computer. So when you try to solve any problem, uh, you need to create uh, a sequence of instructions. Okay, so now you start the instruction 1, 2, 3, 4, then boom, you solve the problem. Okay. Um, so also, so once you actually create a sequence of instructions, then these sequence of instructions are going to solve the problem. Um, these sequence of instructions is also called algorithm. Okay. So that's the general term. Now let's take a look at the simple Java program. I know some of you already learned the Java in the high school, but um, so first you need to know is if you actually already learned Python, uh, you will find out Java is pretty different. Every time when you try to create a Java program, you need to create something called class. Now Python is pretty different. It's actually like a free form. So when you do the Python, you can just do in the prompt, you can just type x equals 1 plus 2, and then it will actually give you return the value. It's a 3. So
I have a quick question.
yes.
So I know that print ln prints a new line. Why do you only need to put it in certain spaces but not other, like the lines? Like how this first line says system out print salary is, and the second one says system out print ln wage. Like why do you not need to put the ln on the first one?
Uh yeah. The difference between print and the println, you know, let me talk about the same thing. The printer basically, or println, both gonna print the string, the character inside the parentheses, right?
Right.
Now the difference is the print. After you print these string, the cursor gonna stay at the end.
Oh, okay.
So it's not gonna actually switch to the next line. Okay.
All
So
right.
yeah, this is a good question because that's the difference. There's a difference between print and print ln. Print ln basically you're gonna actually print the value and then switch to the next line. So
Okay.
your cursor gonna stay at the beginning of the next line. So
Rather than at the end of the first line.
rather at the end of the first one. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. Thank you.
That's something we're gonna talk about in the output part, but yeah, this is a good question. So it very yeah, good observation. So so this is actually the basic syntax for the Java. Um, so you need to actually create something called a class, and then then you have a class name. Basically, it's a very descriptive. Just tells you, what kind of uh, program you try, what kind of problem you try to solve. So normally the class name should be very descriptive. And then also there's a you should always put a line like this: public static void main, and then the then the arguments over here. So so in Java, even for the very simplest program, you need to have a class, and also you need to have a method called a main method. Okay, main method is a starting point to start a Java program. Okay, now you can create a many different methods in Java, in the class, but you cannot run a Java program without a main method. So that's these are the two, you know basic syntax with Java. Now, if you actually learn the Python, you'll find out that Python is pretty simple. They don't actually care. So when you try to say I want to print something, and then you can just in Python you just say print, right? Um, Whatever, and salary. Okay, and there's no actually semicolon at the very end, and then you can say print. You can print another one. Um, so wage times 40, you know, times 50. So you can just write this too, but make sure that when you actually start to do the computing job, you need to make sure that the wage should have a value. So you basically need to say wage equals 20. Okay. So you just need to write 3 lines for Python. But for Java, if you just write this, it will give you a syntax error because you have to include these 3 lines inside a class and inside the main method. Okay, so that's basically what the difference between Java. Okay, so the program always start with the main method. Okay, and also you will notice that for in Java, if you want to assign, create something that's called a variable. Okay, now you're going to assign a value. In this case, it's an integer. Okay. Okay. So you assign 20 into the wage. Okay. Now, because 20 is an integer, so you assign 20 to the variable in wage. And then in Java, you have to actually define the wage as an integer. So you have to put another line here. It's called int space wage semicolon. Okay. Now this is not the case in Python, because in Python you can just directly say, oh, I want to actually, you know, calculate the annual salary, but I'm gonna say, okay, my wage is $20 per hour, so something like this. So then I'm gonna say, okay, I called wage equals 20, and you don't need to worry about oh, this is an integer type, so I need to define wage as an integer. You don't have to do this for Python, okay? But you have to do this for Java. So that's why Java sometimes called statically typed. It's not very flexible. So every time you want to define a variable, you have to define the type. You have to declare the type of the variable. Okay. So wage is an integer. If you assign integer to the wage, you have to declare integer as I'm sorry, you have to declare wage as an integer. Okay. So it's called a statically typed. So you have to declare the integer type first. Now, Python sometimes is called a dynamically typed. Okay. So you don't know what's the type for the wage once you define a variable wage until you assign the value. If you assign integer to the wage, and then the wage is integer. If you assign a real number, a floating number to the wage, and then the wage is going to be a floating type, okay, floating number type. Now for Java, you cannot do that because if you define wage as integer type, you have to assign integer to the wage. If you assign other type to the wage, then you might got the problem. Not necessary, but you might got the problem. So actually, if you declare wage as an integer and you assign a floating type to the wage, for example, you're going to say wage equals 2.7. Okay, 2120.7. Now, I don't think this is right, but the Java still may think it's correct. The syntax is still correct because Java not going to point out this is wrong. But the problem is, even if you assign 20.7 to the wage, and since the wage is defined as an integer, so the actual number stored in the wage is not 20.7. It will get rid of the fractional part, 0.7, and only store 20. So that's the problem. So even though it does not point out any problem, but it's going to cause some problem because it will not do the job you want the Java to do. Because if you declare wage as integer and assign a floating point number to the wage, then the wage actually going to store only the integer part, and you're going to get rid of the fractional part. So that's not something you like, right? So it's really confusing. So that's why if you're actually using the Java language, try to make sure when you declare a type as integer, only assign the integer type to that variable. So that's what I wanted to say. Okay, so this is actually the very simple Java program. So let me actually erase that part. Please do not do this. Okay. Also, just like Python, the Java also allow people to import the value when you actually run the program. Okay, so that's the more desirable way to import data, because this way you basically import the data by use something called assignment. Okay, so you assign the value to the wage. Now, does everyone know what's the difference between the assignment and the equality. Now, in math, if you put actually this, in math, it means equal, right? But what does that mean in computer language?
It means that it's just assigned to that value.
It's assigned to the value. So you have to realize this. Okay, I I don't want to emphasize this again and again, but in computer language, if you want to actually, if you use this equal sign, that means it's assignment. So what does that mean is you basically assign the value on the right to the variable on the left. Okay, so the variable is just like some kind of placeholder. When you declare a wage as an integer in Java, it means that the computer actually going to actually reserve a memory space in the memory, a space in the memory. Uh, that space in the memory going to be actually reserved for the wage. Okay. Now, if you declare as an integer, now it will basically reserve the space as 32-bit. Okay. 32 bits binary space. 32 bits basically means you can write uh, up to 32 binary digitals. Okay, so it's a 32 bits. So and then when you assign the value 20, then you basically assign the value 20 into that space. Okay, if you assign another value to the wage, you're going to override the existing value, which is currently in that space. Okay, so it's more like a placeholder. Okay. Um, now, in typically in computer language, if you want to compare two numbers, if you say whether this number is the same as the other number, whether they are equal. So now in this case, you're probably going to use different notation. For example, in most case, in Python, you type the equal twice. So if you're gonna say x equals y, that means you try to compare the value x and compare the value y, whether they are equal or not. Okay, so that's a comparison. Um, but this single equal sign, this just basically means assignment. Okay. Now, you can actually create the import using the assignment. You're gonna say, oh, I want to add two number x and y, so I assign uh, two numbers to one number to x, one number to y. So I'm gonna say x equals 20 semicolon, y equals 30 semicolon, and then I can add x and y. Okay, so the assignment could be served as import, but the more popular way of import is using some of the syntax called a scanner. This is actually the scanner is kind of a keyword, you know, in Java language. So in Java, its scanner is actually defined as object. Uh, it's basically is to set it is set up to scan import from system in. Okay. So when I actually use a scanner, I'm gonna declare a scanner object. Okay. So the syntax is put scanner space and then scnr. That's the object of a scanner. So you don't have to use scnr. You can use any other like a variable names. So you can use scnr or you can use okay my import whatever you can call this. Okay. So scanner equals scnr equals new scanner. That's the syntax to create a scanner object. Okay, So SCNR is a scanner object. Okay. Okay. Now the scanner object is basically, you will see that the scanner is defined as a class. Scanner object is, a one particular instance of a scanner. So it can actually perform the job. There are many, many different methods defined in this object. There are many, many methods defined in this scanner object. So when you call this method, you can actually first type the object name SCNR and then put a dot, and then that's the method. Okay. The method called nextInt will actually scan these import system in and check the next imported value. So the next imported value is basically the value you just typed at the prompt. Okay, so that's called a scanner scan.nextInt. Okay, so now once you actually type the value in the prompt, and then you scan the value at the prompt. At the prompt, you can type, for example, next integer, you type 20, and then the value 20 you just type when you hit the enter, then this value you just typed will be assigned to the variable called wage, and the variable wage is declared as integer, right? It declared as integer. As integer. Okay. Now, one thing I had to mention that many times when I try to add some kind of comment in the computer in the Java language, I use actually double forward slash, and double forward slash in Java is normally means comments. So if you want to put the comments in the computer language in Java, you use double forward slash. Okay. So this will not going to impact the execution of the computer language. Okay, so and then once you assign this wage, assign this imported value to the wage, and then you can print the statement system.out.print, and in this case salary is, you're going to print it out, and the wage. Let me actually show you over here in the iBook. Okay. Let me see. Where's the? Okay, you can pick any of the zybook area, and you can actually run any of the program here. So let's see. So let's do this. Okay, let me stop presenting here. I'm gonna present something else to you. Okay. Now, so for example, if you want to use a scanner, then you're gonna actually type. Let's see. I can change this. You can No, this is not going to work. Let me find one place I can update the code over here. Okay, so now this does not work. So let's do this. Okay, let me just try to find one of the sorry, this is not the one I want. Okay, let's just do. Yeah, that's the place I want to actually find out. So so this is actually the the Java code. So as I say, that you need to create a class, and that's a class name called a salary, and what this Java code is try to do is to calculate your annual salary, right? So your wage is basically the hourly, rate. So your hourly rate is 20. So you basically, you are paid $20 per hour, and then if you want to calculate the annual salary, then you need to first calculate the weekly rate, right? So the weekly rate is the wage, which is our rate, times 40. So assume that you're going to work 40 hours a week. So basically wage times 40, that gives you a weekly rate. And then to calculate the annual rate, typically it will multiply 50 weeks. Okay. I think for each year, you expect to have 52 weeks, but when you calculate the annual salary, they only count 50 weeks a year. So now you have a hourly rate, and then weekly rate, and then annual rate. Okay, so you need to realize that's what it is. Okay.
Why didn't you need the scanner function in this one, but you needed it in the one in the PowerPoint?
Now this is not a scanner. This is actually the assignment. We're gonna actually address the scanner later. So
Okay.
so let's see. If I run this program, you will find out that this is actually the output. Okay, so what the output means, let me analyze this. So the first salary is, so this is actually is printed here, right? Salary is, and oh, actually salary is, don't forget the space after is. Okay, so, and then the cursor actually stays here, right? Stays over here right before 40,000. And then the second part is the Java going to first calculate this value. So wage is 20, so you're going to be 20 times 40 times 50, so which is 40,000. And then you're going to print it out right after this. Okay. Now to understand how this actually works, let me actually modify the code a little bit. So first, the one I want to modify is if I eliminate the space here, and then just run it, you will find out the space just disappeared, right, in the output. So the space is here. So space also count as a character. So if you put a space, and it will print out a space. Now if you put a multiple space, then you will find out the output is going to be, different. Okay. Now the other thing I want to modify is if I actually put the LN, so that means you will see the difference. The salary is going to be printed in the first line, and the actual value for 40,000 is going to be printed on the second line. Okay. You see the difference here? Okay. So that's the first program. For the next one, now you can change the code into using the scanner, right? Okay. You can use the scanner. So here it is. So let's see. If I use the scanner, then what the code is going to look like. So let me actually show here. So here it is. So they use the scanner, and let me see. So here, when you use the compiler in Zybook, you will realize that if you use a scanner, so basically the scanner allow us to, typically if you use any traditional compiler like a NetBean, if you use NetBean, then you will find out. So if you use a scanner, then you're gonna actually pop out, give you some kind of prompt, and after the prompt, you're gonna type your answer here. But in Zybook, if you use scanner, they're gonna create a separate text box. So in the text box, you can type whatever the value you're supposed to actually import into the scanner. Okay, so in this case, you see the program here. Now, in order to use a scanner, you have to scanner is actually defined in one of the things called a Java library. The Java library contains many, many different features, many, many different methods. So, and you can use all the methods defined in the Java library and without creating your own. So that's called a code reuse, because the good thing about the computer language is that if this is a method that are going to be widely used by many people, so it's a very popular method, then you can create the method and store in the Java library. So now other people can simply use them. Okay. You don't have to create the method again and again. So now this is another example. I'm gonna run the scanner using another example. I'm not gonna use the same example. I can, but I want to use another one. So in this example, we use a class called a dog year. So dog year. So it's kind of funny that people always think that for human being, if we live 1 year, it's equivalent to 7 dog years. Okay, so what does that mean is, if a dog lived 1 year, then we only actually increase 1 year, right? So if you are actually 20 years old, and after a year you're going to be 21 years old, but for dog, every year they're going to increase 7. Their age is going to increase by 7. So it's kind of like a, you know, we kind of interpret, uh, how old the dog going to be. So when you say a dog has a dog has lived for like 3 years, so that means the dog is not kind of a 3-year old. So that it's a 3-year dog. It's almost like 3 times 7, like a 20-year-old human being. So that means, you know, after 3 years, you know, as a human, it's only 3 years old. It's still a baby, right? But for dog, after 3 years, it's already an adult, So that's basically what it means. So let's see this. So again, public class dog years. So that's a class, and that's the class name called dog year. And then we have a main method. Okay. Um, so we define something called a scanner. Okay. So as I said, that you have to actually import uh, the scanner, a scanner up a class, which is actually already in the Java library. So you're going to import java.util, that utility dot scanner, but they use util. And then you define a scanner object, scnr, and you're going to scan the values from the system in. System in is the system import area. So now you're going to declare 2 variables. One is dog year, which is an integer. Another is human years, also an integer. Okay. Now we're going to build a relationship between human years and dog years. Okay. So then what you're going to do is you're going to call the scanner object, scni, and say, please enter the next integer. And after you enter the next integer, enter the integer value. Then this value is going to be assigned to the dog years. And then we can actually calculate the human years. So this basically builds up the relationship between dog year and a human year. Okay. And then, so we're going to practice some of the output. So you just realize that you have a whole bunch of system out, the printer statement. So this is the syntax for printer statement. So import is actually, when you import the value, you're going to say import.in. When you do the output, you're going to say system.out. Here's system.in. Here's system.out. System.out.print. So you're going to print a character A and a space. Don't forget the space. It's also a character. And then the cursor stays here. And then the next one you're going to print is a dog year. Okay. It's a value, whatever the value you just imported. Okay. And then the cursor stays after dog year. And then the next you're going to print is, double quote. That means you're going to print the string over here. And so the printer year-old dog is about the same age as a human year. And then you print integer. Okay. So now when you run this, you need to actually put the value. So if you say you put the 3 here, so that means this 3 will be imported here using the scanner, and then this 3 going to be assigned to dog years. Okay, and then you run it. Okay. A 3-year-old dog is about the same age as a 21-year-old human being. Now, don't get me wrong, because even though the 20-year-old human being actually switched to the next line, technically it's still at the same line because we are running out of space here, so that's why it just turned around. So the whole sentence is actually in the same line. Just keep that in mind, because we don't have much space. Otherwise, it's going to continue after the A. 20-year-old human should be after the A, but because we're running out of space, so it just turn around to the next line. So it's still the same line. It's not the next line. Okay. This is actually one way to do this. And sometimes people are going to ask, you actually going to type one line. Why you need a 5 output statement, output printer statement? So you can actually use one printer statement. Okay. For example, you can actually say A, you can put the plus sign, say dog year. Okay. And you can actually eliminate that one. Okay. So this is also going to do the job. Okay. It's the same thing. So you can even eliminate that one by put another plus. In this case, the plus is not, basically does not mean addition. It means concatenate. So because here's the string, dog year is whatever the number you actually imported, which is 3. So now you're going to be actually concatenate this string with another string which contains number 3. And then if you concatenate another one, then you're going to say, okay, y okay. So you actually just concatenate all these string, and if you run, it's still going to give you the same output. Okay. So that's the other way. You can I'm going to actually keep that one. So okay, so that's the original code. So now you need to know the difference between print and the printer ln, right? It's basically ln basically stands for line, so print line. So that means you print and then you change a line, so to the next line. So that's the scanner. Okay, scanner basic. Now the scanner is kind of flexible because it allows you to import the value when you run the program. So when you run the program next time, you can change the value. So for example, if a dog has been lived for 7 years, okay. So if a dog has lived for 7 years, now what is the equivalent of human years with 7-year dog? For 7 years old dog, what is the actual, a 7-year-old dog is about the same age as 49 years old human being, because the human years is actually 7 times the dog year. The dog year is 7, so 7 times 7 is 49. So this is actually the computing part. Now, if you look at this computer program, you will find out, now this part is the import part, right? So gave you the import instructions. Now these 2 instructions basically are the processes. Okay. Now these 5 system.out print statement or print lines ln statement is the output. Okay. So import processes, output. Okay, so that's the basic of 3 actually instruction types we just mentioned earlier in the in the PowerPoint. Okay, do you have any questions? Okay, just feel free to interrupt me if you have any question, so I can always stop. So now let's switch back to the presentation. Let's see. So now section 1.3 is about comments and the white spaces. Okay, a comment is is text a programmer adds to the code. Okay, now comment is a very important part of the computer program in any computer program. So now comment is actually not mean for the computer to read. It's basically the comment is basically designed for a human being to read it, because when you actually write many lines of computer code, computer program. Now, so when you create the program at the time, you probably actually very clear about, okay, I define this variable. I know what I'm going to use for this variable. However, after a couple of weeks or couple of months, when you actually come back and read the same code, you're probably going to already forgot what I was thinking. So why I create this variable? What's the purpose of this? So now you have to read the code again and try to figure out why I did that. Why did I do that? So that's one thing. The other thing is that if you write your code and you give the code to someone else, they need to read your code and figure out why you want to define this variable, right? And this is actually very important because when you actually work in a company, it's likely that you're going to collaborate with some other your colleagues in same piece of code. And once you write your code is going to be actually stored in the database and stored somewhere in the company actually system. And your code may be read by many other people. So they need to read your code. Okay. So in that case, it will always be a good idea, good practice to put the comments in the code. When you define something, when you define a method, and put some kind of description to tell people what's the purpose of why you want to create this method. What's the purpose? What does this method do? So you need to provide some kind of a description. And then when you provide a description, a comment is a very good way to provide this, to serve that purpose. Okay. Now there.
Am I in the wrong meeting?
Yeah. Which meeting you're supposed to actually join? Is a CSC 1500? 50-50. I'm sorry.
I believe so.
Okay. Just check it.
Yeah, because I've tried to go to the other link, the one that was posted on the first email. Yeah. I didn't know. Yeah, because I thought the group links that you sent us were like, I don't know, our personal separate, meeting.
Oh, okay. So no. That's the class meeting, but the personal separate one. If I ask you to join each of the individual groups, then you need to join the separate one. But in general, you always join this one for the class.
Okay.
Okay. So the comments, there are two actual different syntax. One is if you simply just put the comment in one line, then you can use the double forward slash. Okay. Okay, that's just for single line comments. Now for multi-line comments, you're gonna use this, forward slash, asterisk, and then asterisk forward slash. Okay, so if you want to put a whole bunch of comments, it's just across a couple of lines, then you're probably gonna use this to put the comments. Okay, so the comments, as I say, the comments is basically when a computer actually compiler see the comments, the compiler gonna skip the comment. It will not, put this comments in the code. So that comments basically mean to be read by people, not by the computer compiler. That's one thing. And also the other important actually thing is the white space. Okay, you can see that when you print a statement, so if you put the white space like a space here, when you print, it will print as it is. You put the two space, then it will print a two space. It will leave two space. Okay, two spaces. So white space is very important. Okay. Now you need to realize that if you actually write some Python code, for example, x equals 20, semicolon. That's one Java assignment. Okay. Now, typically, you can leave a space here. You have a space in between. Now, if you actually write y equals, now if I actually put a couple of space, okay, so then say 100. Okay. Now, so when you type y space, you press space bar once, twice, three times, and type 100. And in this case, Java, the compiler will typically ignore most of the white space. Okay, so this space, it doesn't matter how many space you put in there. It's basically the same as y equals 100. From the syntax, Java will not actually differentiate these things. The Java going to treat these two as the same statement. Even though you have a three space here and you have one space here, basically it's the same assignment. Doesn't make any difference. Okay. So the compiler typically going to ignore the space. Okay, in the Java language. However, if you actually put in the print statement, or print line, print ln statement. It doesn't matter which print, either print or print line. So if you try to print a double quote, if you try to print a string, say, okay, I am, here's a space, in space CSC 1550 double quote semicolon, then this will print out I am in CSC 1500 or 1550. Okay. Now, if you put one space here in the print out statement, it will actually give you one space. Now, if you actually say put two space or three space, then the Java gonna print out as it is. So if you leave 3 space, it will in the print out statement, it will actually give you 3 space. If you actually put more space, then the Java going to display more space in the output. So that's the difference. Because but in the Java code, like a statement, as assignments, then Java typically going to ignore the space, but not in the print statement. In the print statement, if you have more space, the Java going to actually print out more space. Java never going to ignore these space. Okay. Now, next thing I want to talk about is errors and the warnings. Okay. So this is always happens for any computer language, right? So if you work in Python, if you accidentally make a mistake and type the wrong syntax, the Python gonna refuse to execute the program, and it will just list a whole bunch of error messages, right? Same thing with the Java. So in Java, there are a couple of different error. The most popular kind of error message is a syntax error. Okay, syntax is a violation of a programming language's rule on how symbols can be combined to create a program. As I mentioned, that in Java, when you run the Java program, you have to create like a public class. You have to define a class. If you actually ignore this first line, you don't start with a class, you will get an error message. Or if you would want to type, you want to put actually in the main methods, like a public static void main. Then if you somehow skip that line, then it will give you error message. Or if you actually in the print out statement, if you actually supposed to type system dot out, and then you're gonna put the system dot ou, you forgot a T. Print. Then this is gonna give you error message. Now also, if you actually type something like a system dot out dot print, okay, even this will give you error message. Do you know what's wrong with this?
Do you need an uppercase on the S in system?
Yes, you got it. So Java language is case sensitive. Okay, so if you actually type any kind of keyword, it is a if you need to type a capital letter and you actually fail to do this, you put a lowercase, then Java gonna give you error message. So it's case sensitive. Okay. And so most widely mistake are going to be mostly people type the Java actually sentences statement and you forgot the semicolon at the very end. Then that's a very popular mistakes. That's a syntax error. When there's a syntax error, the compiler generates a message, and the compiler try to point out where is the problem. But unfortunately, for Java or many other languages, if you make a mistake, if you type something wrong in your code, and the Java may point out, say, hey, you got an error message in line 100. Okay, now you're going to jump to 100 and you find out nothing's wrong. I think everything's right. Now that's typical because every time when Java actually find out, okay, there's a mistake. Once Java find a mistake at the place, the Java going to point out there's a mistake. But sometimes the mistake did not happen at the line when Java say there's a mistake. Most likely, the mistake actually happens, before that line. So that's that's the confusing part. Sometimes it takes a long for people to figure out where's actually the mistake. Okay. Because the problem is, for example, if you miss the semicolon in one particular line, and Java think, okay, Java probably don't think the Java compiler probably doesn't think you missed the semicolon at this line. The Java compiler just think that oh, you haven't finished the line yet. So in the next statement, the Java compiler still treated next line as part of the current line. And then they find out something goes wrong, but then the Java compiler may point out and telling me the misleading information, say you got a mistake in some other place, but it actually mistake happens way before that because you simply missed the semicolon. But if you missed the semicolon at this particular moment, the Java still didn't realize that you made a mistake. Java just think, the compiler just think, oh, your line hasn't ended yet. So they're going to treat the next line as part of the previous line. So that's the reason why it many times it happens that way. So if you have a mistake, then you check the line. If there's no problem, always goes up and check whether there's a problem with the previous lines. Okay. So that's why compiler error messages are often unclear and even misleading. The message is like the compiler's, basically the message is like the compiler's best guess of what's really wrong. It's best guess. Okay. So and also sometimes when you actually compile a code and you got tons of error messages, you got 100 error messages, 200 error messages, you're scared. So my code is only like 50 lines. Why I got 200 error messages? You're so scared. But try to calm down because sometimes it's just a very small mistake, and so if you fix that mistake, all the 100 mistake is going to be gone. Okay, error message is going to be gone. So it's just one small mistake. But Java basically just guessed that, oh, because of this mistake, because you made this mistake, Java gonna think, okay, this might be wrong, this might be wrong. So you're gonna print out tons of mistake error messages. So don't be scared. So try to fix the earliest one as possible, and then once you fix one problem and try to recompile it. Okay, because sometimes Java gave you 20 error messages. Doesn't necessarily mean there's 20 errors. There's probably only one error. So if you fix that error, probably all the other errors are going to be gone. So just keep that in mind. Now, the syntax error is actually relatively easy to figure out because syntax error sounds scary because the code is not going to run. So you compile it, it gives you tons of error messages say, I'm not going to run it because it's not working. But honestly, it's not the most scary part. No, I think the more scary part is the logical errors. The logical errors actually is kind of error that it won't be detected by the Java compiler. But when you actually try to run this program, execute the program, you pass the compiling, and you try to run the program not going to give you the correct answers. Okay. Or during the run execution of the program, it just pop off the error message. It's called the runtime error. Okay. So logical error is actually more difficult to diagnose and more difficult to fix. So there are many problems. Sometimes you have the problem like a number is divided by 0. Okay, if a number is divided by 0 in math, it doesn't make any sense, right? But in this case, it's gonna give you one runtime error. So logical error is actually more difficult to diagnose because it does not give you the error message, until you actually run the program. Okay, I think that's pretty much all I want to talk about for today. So we're gonna still continue to actually spend probably 1 or 2 class to complete the first chapter. So please actually start your exercises in the Zybooks. So what I'm gonna do is after the class, I'm gonna post this PowerPoint on the Blackboard. But just keep that in mind. All the materials, all the actually topics on the PowerPoint is actually pulled from the Zybooks. So there's nothing difference between the PowerPoint. But the PowerPoint only gave you the overview and the summary of this. Okay. Okay. So please just keep your eye on the Blackboard. I actually normally, if I want you to do something, I'm gonna post as an announcement on the Blackboard. So keep your eye on the Blackboard. And also, you need to actually probably switch back and forth between Blackboard and the Zybooks. These are the 2 areas you need to check frequently. Please actually finish the first 2 assignments, 1A and 1B on the Zybook. And then next Monday, we're going to actually continue our topics. And I'll also, as I said, I created I created a couple of links for the groups and also form the groups. And I will give you instructions. So hopefully in what follows, we're going to actually, before we start the topic, I want you to read the books, Zybook, and have some kind of discussions in your team. And then each team gonna come out with some questions and some, or if you have any issues, just raise some issues during the class. I hope that we can talk about some kind of issues you have, instead of just I keep talking. I don't even know whether you actually know that material or not. Some area, if it's simple, I try to spend less time. But if for some of the topics, if it's more important, I want to spend more time on some of the topics. So that's why I want you to form a group, and so hopefully each group are going to have a small chat, a discussion, and give me the feedback. I sometimes are going to schedule a group time during the class. Okay, so you can have a group meeting simultaneously. I'm going to jump back and forth among the groups. So hopefully we can, get more questions and more, or more suggestions from you. Okay. Okay. That's pretty much it. Okay.
Thanks for today.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. If you have any questions, just email me or, stop by my office hour. So I'll talk to you later. Have a good weekend.
Thank
Have a
you.
good weekend, Professor.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks.
Isn't the class supposed to start at 11?
Yeah, we have another class at the start at 11.